went into consolidating the collective knowledge of system engineering that was known from the last 15 years. So without further ado, Gary, please come forward, and I guess you're wired, so you're live and ready to go.
Yes. Can everybody hear me? All right. Well, thank you. So actually, I'm surprised at how many of the faces I know in this audience. So, you know, I expected to come here and have, you know, maybe one or two people I knew. Actually, I feel like I'm among friends. Certainly part of the Incose family. So I probably won't give as much of the history, okay, as I will. I mean, there will be some history as to where we are and how we're looking at this. But what I'm really going to be looking at is not just 15288, but the whole suite of system engineering resources and where we've been trying to take that in a roadmap that leads us to a harmonized set of resources that we can use concurrently, okay, where the terminology and everything works together. So, all right, do I need to? Okay. All right, so I first wanted to ask, how many people are familiar with or have used 15288? All right, so quite a fair number of people. How about this one here, the Incose Handbook? In this group, obviously, I mean, I would be really surprised if there wasn't a hand, you know, if all hands didn't go up. So, and oh, by the way, what's on the right side is what the new handbook will look like, okay, except it won't have iStock on the picture. Okay, how many people are familiar with the CBOC, Systems Engineering Body of Knowledge? Okay. That is a part of our repertoire now, okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But that is an online resource that is a guide to the body of knowledge for SE and will lead you to a lot of different resources. And what about this one, the Defense Acquisition Guidebook? Probably less hands, but okay, quite a number of you have used it. Doesn't surprise me considering where we are in, you know, this close to the Beltway. These are all some of the resources we're going to be talking about. You know, when I start looking at these, it's you know, it's not just these four. These are some of the major ones. There's also others that we'll take a look at. So in the in our discussion today, we'll talk a little bit about some of the background with the standardization and the resources. We'll talk some steps taken towards harmonization. Okay, and this has been actually a fairly long road. Oops, went too quickly. We're also going to look at basic concepts behind 15288, some of those that are the foundation of bringing this harmonization together. We'll talk a little bit about some DoD standardization initiative that's going on, and in fact, we've already had some questions asked of us regarding this. So George and I were fielding some responses to a person from the Army yesterday. And some impact on the industry from that, transition for the use of the standards, and some other resources. So with that, let's move on then. Okay, so Steve Welby, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for SE, has gone on record of saying that standards are necessary because they provide us that corporate memory and also help us to understand the critical processes and practices that are likely to lead us to successful programs. All right, and one of the things that we've seen in the past with this is that there's a number of complicating factors. Of course, if you go back far enough, for those of us who were in the DoD world, it was fairly easy. We had all of these MIL standards, and the acquisition reform, though, that all went away. And then as a matter of over time, we started seeing things in which, especially not between systems and software, differences in terminology, differences in process sets, structures, the level of prescription, the audiences that they're written for. Okay, we also have seen differences between both between systems and software, and also within each of the disciplines themselves. And there's not many systems right now that you have that don't have software, so we need to make sure that these things work together. And the problem's been exacerbated by competing standards and also a lack of understanding of what tailoring is necessary for what domain. So these were the things that we needed to start to look at in working towards a common set of things that could work together. All right, so some of the steps taken towards harmonization. This is a very old chart, actually. The date on the bottom of this is not the first version of this that came together. But a gentleman by the name of Jim Moore, who is representing the ITripleE Computer Society, and myself and a few others were working towards what do we want to do within SC7, that's Subcommittee 7 of JTC1, Joint Technical Committee between ISO and IEC. And that's where 15288 resides. That's also where the software lifecycle processes 12207 resides, okay, and a number of other standards that you may be familiar with. And so the idea was we need to be able to have standards that can be used concurrently, not each looked at as their own little island where you don't even recognize the others existing. So you can see here in the two columns, 12207 and 15288, the idea was to get these so that they could be used in an what we were calling interoperable manner. Okay, they could be used concurrently without any difficulty. Okay, and that we would have a series of elaboration standards that would take these life cycle processes and elaborate them for those who have a need for the lower level details. All right, things like project management, measurement, risk management. Okay, and those standards, there were most of these, there'd be no reason that they needed to be different for system or software, but instead to account for any specific advice on those in notes. All right, they would be built on a common vocabulary, process architecture, and process description conventions. They'd be built so they could be, they would be able to use the same kind of process assessment, and that they would be under the same guidance for life cycle management. So the same concepts. So it's a pretty simple concept, but there was a lot behind trying to make this happen. Okay, note the date as of 9/15/2014. This is what we ended up with as of 9 September, is all of these standards in here, and excuse the one that has the numbers on it, but there's one here that doesn't have a number yet, or didn't at that time. But in any case, these all can be used together. They come from different sources. They're not all SC7. Some are ISO, some are ITripleE, some are joint standards. Some things in here are outside of the standards world, but they're what we've been working on mostly through SC7 and its liaisons. All right, so I only show you that to realize that we have made a lot of progress. It's taken about 15 years to get there, though. All right, and this has been done through growing industry collaboration that continues to grow. And so what you see here is, Incose's a big player, and through the work that Ken Zemrowski has been doing and leading the standards initiative, and the number of people that we have in Incose who have leadership roles in the various standards, as well as in the ITripleE Computer Society, ISO, IEC, and there's a number of others here you see, like Tech America, NDIA, and some of the other technical committees within ISO, all have been working together jointly to try and make this picture continue, to continue that harmonization. And so you see things where, you know, we're working under a common vocabulary. There's something called SE vocab. Has anybody been out to the site SE vocab and actually use that? There's a link to this. Actually, if you just go on and Google SE vocab, you get a combined vocabulary for ITripleE Computer Society, ISO IEC SC7, PMI, and we're trying to get the Incose terminology also incorporated into that. So it's a very good resource. You know, so we also have things like the reference curricula that's been developed under the leadership of the CERC and Stevens that corresponds with this, and the CBOC and SWEBOC. So there's a lot that has been moving in that direction. Okay, so this diagram here shows a concept that we have now come to have. All right, it's we started with 15288 and an agreement to drive the SE handbook for Incose to be in alignment. As we have done that, once the CBOC, which would have been back about 2009, the project started. It was actually released in 2012. Once that was underway, that project, it used these two documents, 15288 and the SE handbook, as key resources, okay, for it. And in doing so, though, as the CBOC continues to evolve, and it happens to be that it's updated twice a year, it has now been where it is influencing back to the 15288 in handbook. Okay, so what you see is they are evolving together. One goes takes a step and the others catch up and they take a step. And so what I call this is technical coevolution model. All right, and it's a healthy process, and it allows us to be able to continue to move things forward, but move them together. All right, out of this, you'll see also from 15288, there are some domain addendums that are starting to come out. There's one from NATO, and there's one from DoD. We'll talk in depth about the one from DoD, and that's why I have that circled. But these are, how do you use 15288 in a specific environment? All right, so they don't repeat 15288, they provide deltas, changes, additional notes, things necessary for describing how to implement those. Now, you see 632 here. How many people are familiar with EIA 632? There was a time where almost every hand would have been up, okay? It's kind of faded away, but it is not dead. And it is under Tech America, well, actually now it's under SAE, I should say, okay? Because Tech America's standards went into SAE. And they are still trying to do something with that, but there's been agreement to align also with 15288 and to establish a specific purpose and objective set for it that will supplement 15288. All right, you see the DAG and even NIST. Okay, there was a comment given to me from NIST that they were adopting the 15288 process framework, and the words that were in the statement were that they wanted to take advantage of the newest revision so they could leverage the groundbreaking improvements in 15288. And we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. Okay, so that you can see the picture is that we're moving forward and bringing these things together with a common vision, and that it's a strategic picture. Okay, so in order to truly understand the basis, we need to understand some of the concepts. Since most of you are familiar with or have used 15288, I won't dwell on the details here, and that will give us more time for looking at some of the other things. As you probably know, 15288 provides a framework for managing the full life cycle of the system. All right, and it can be applied to any size organization. It applies to most domains and is applicable to almost any life cycle model. It's very modular in its processes. The set of processes and terminology can be applied at any level within the system hierarchy or structure. And there's not an intended sequential, linear, one way to put these things together. It is intended that you can go back and forth between the processes as necessary, and in fact, it is encouraged. And we'll talk about something called iteration and recursion in a moment. Okay, you also see that it allows for concurrent process application. So you could have multiple processes happening at the same time, or even concurrent stages. And there are many examples, if you think of the systems you work with, where you are not in one stage at a time, where you may have one part of it in support, another part in utilization, while there's some development going on, and that's typical. Okay, so it's not meant to be linear flow. The other thing here is that I wanted to point out, well, I guess I should point out something we talked about before. Humans may be a system element. It depends on what it is they do and the functions that they perform within it. Okay, so hardware, software, humans are processes, and it focuses on the what, not the how. And it's intended to be that way, so that the standard says this is what you need to do. You've got flexibility in how you perform that. It doesn't dictate the methods or the techniques. Okay, and it includes a tailoring process because they're expected to need to tailor. All right, so the process elements, each process has purpose. The purpose is basically the objective of performing that process. The outcomes are things that are observable results that show that you've achieved that purpose. The activities and tasks are the actions that are performed in order to obtain those outcomes, and then it also includes notes. What it does not provide are inputs and outputs, because those may be dependent on your domain, your business environment, and other things. All right, so those can be added, and we've got an example of that. Okay, so another thing is that the 15288 talks about a system, and a system is made up of system elements. It does not try to create this unilateral hierarchy like we had seen in the past, where a system has subsystems, subsystems have assemblies, and so on and so forth, because the systems we're dealing with have so many levels. And it also, in thinking in this way, it allows you to come into it at the point you are looking at, this is what the system is to me, okay? And so the system itself, wherever you're coming in, and that part of it is your system of interest. That system of interest made up of system elements, then each element, if it is able to be defined further, can be looked at as a system with its system elements, and continue that until you get to a point where you have a make, buy, or reuse decision to make. Okay, so the other thing here is, by looking at it in this way, it also serves the purposes of being able to apply this for translating for system of systems. And actually, it's a very natural piece of 15288. Because that system of interest, the way that we have looked at it, is not to be looked at by itself. You need to look at the system of interest in the context of the other systems that it's interoperating with, as well as also those enabling systems that support the performance of that system through its life cycle. Okay, so when you look at that picture and say, if I'm looking at these things together, what do I have? I've got a system of systems. How many times have you ever seen that all your enabling systems and interoperating systems and the system of interest come under the same governance? Not too often, right? So we really are usually dealing with a system of systems situation. All right. And one thing I should mention is we've gone as far as also in the revision that will be coming out in within the next 2 months, it actually has an annex on how you use 15288 for a system of systems. All right, the other thing I wanted to point out was iterative and recursive approach for system definition. Or when we are looking at these, we expect that you are going to need to go between processes. Things don't happen in a completely linear flow. That as an example here, as you look at, say, system requirements and architecture, that you're going to, define requirements. It's going to affect the architecture. There will be some decisions that flow back, and it maybe make some trades, other different trades on the requirements. And so there's this iteration between processes, and there's also then from one level of the system to the next, where you will repeat those processes at that next level. All right, and so rather than saying, okay, we've got the system requirements process, and now we got the subsystem requirements process, and you just repeat that at the level that you're at. So these are pretty fundamental concepts that we're trying to apply. Now, in looking at the revision of 15288, if you look at the 2008 version, we were really focused on system definition itself. From the point that you've decided, I have a system, this is a kind of system, and you move forward. What we have done with the revision is taken it a step further to say that we really also need to understand or be at the point of making that decision of what type of system. What is the capability that you're trying to provide, and so what is the right system to be defining and putting in place. And so the current version that the version that will be coming out will be able to take that other region by adding in mission analysis, expanding what we're doing in the stakeholder needs, and so that we can go from when a business has done its strategic planning or an organization has identified new capabilities or opportunities, that we can then do the work necessary to define what the right system is and then move into defining that. And that's part of that system lifecycle. Okay, so that also helps us support the concepts of system of systems as well. Now this is the view of 15288 from the 2008 version. So the version that's published right now and will still be out for another 2 months. What you see is 26 processes and 4 process groups. The agreement processes providing the two-party discussion between the supplier and the acquirer. The organizational process enabling processes that basically facilitate the project by providing the resources that it needs. Okay, so when you see something like human resource management process here, it's not everything that you ever wanted to know about human resource management. It's only that part that is an interface to the system project to be able to enable it to do its work. Okay, so, and that would be for all those organizational project enabling processes. You find out that the project portfolio management is fairly important because that's the one that's going to say whether we're going to invest in this system project in the first place. And it also, balances what you're doing in that system with other system projects. All right, the project processes are the ones you would think about in terms of helping to manage it, and then there's the technical processes. Now there are changes that are being made to this set with the current revision. Okay, first, and I guess I should explain the color coding here. Where we have a blue box, that's a new process. Where we have this sort of lavender box, that says that there was some reasonable change being made to the process. Okay, so we realized that knowledge management really needed to be added here to capture not only what the organization's knowledge is in terms of its people and such, but also in terms of reuse. Okay, the domain engineering, the kind of reusable assets, the things that would support future projects. All right, and what you see in the project processes have turned into the technical management processes. All right, so that's just the change in the group name, but we wanted to make it clear that we're not talking about all of project management. We're talking about the technical focus on managing the project. Now, we have made some changes in the planning and assessment control. We've just about rewritten the configuration management process. And in doing that, we reached out to the leading CM standards, to their editors, and said, here, we've rewritten this. Can you take a look at this? We believe it's in line with your standard. Okay, so EIA 649B. Anybody know that one? National Consensus Standard for CM. It's probably, if you were a CM person, your hand would have went up really quickly. Okay. And ITripleE 828 is the other one. So we went out and touched base with them, asked them to review them. They did. They provided good comments back. And so that is very much in line. And that's, again, part of that whole harmonization so that we can reach out to those pieces. The quality assurance process here is a new one. We had quality management at the top level, for the organizational, but we didn't really have anything that was implementing quality at the project level. Okay, so the quality assurance was doing that. All right, and in the technical processes, as I said, we had mission analysis. We actually call business and mission analysis, okay, because for commercial people, they really don't recognize mission analysis. But they basically are very, very, very similar. And in putting that together, we not only looked at the DoD and NASA work, we also looked at things from Harvard Business Review and made sure that it met the requirements. We made some changes to clarify the flow and transformation between the mission capabilities down through the stakeholder needs and requirements to the system requirements and the architecture and so on. Now, in the previous version, and I'm going to back up for a second, you saw here that there was actually an architectural design process. That doesn't exist anymore. Instead, it's an architecture definition process and a design definition process. And an architecture could be implemented in various types of designs. They are, and we wanted to make that discrete, the two of those two discrete processes to understand that. And that an architecture actually can be reused across different projects. It can actually have its own life cycle. All right, and so we worked with the people in Working Group 42, and for those of you who understand the SC7 organizational structure, that's the architecture group. And they were very accommodating in trying to help figure out exactly what should go into the processes, as well as a couple of our Incose subject matter experts. All right, what else you see here is system analysis. Didn't exist before. It was implied by the different processes that you needed to do some system analysis. Okay, but there was no generic system analysis process that led you through what needs to happen. So that has been put in place. I'll tell you, the biggest problem we've had in this revision was answering the question of, does system analysis really belong in the technical processes or the technical management processes? Probably the one thing that kept coming up. And there, I'll tell you, you could make a case for either one. My concern was just that it's there, all right? And which grouping it is in is somewhat more arbitrary. Okay, and so that is basically a summary of the changes. And so therefore, what happens is that 26 turns to 30. There's 30 processes in the new version of 15288. All right, and I think most of them make pretty good sense. One thing I didn't cover that I should is tailoring. Tailoring is a process in 15288. It's not actually counted in this, so if you count tailoring, it's 31 processes. It is a process that is in Annex A, and it basically says that it is expected that an organization will need to tailor some or all of the processes for their projects or for their organization. Okay, and in fact, the conformance clause, you could have full conformance or tailored conformance. All right, so therefore, it's a significant process as well and shouldn't be underestimated. All right, so I don't need to go through this because basically this is the words that talk to what I've just said. And what you can see by this chart is that 15288 has a very wide adoption. This is only a small piece of the examples. You'll see some are defense, transportation, Incose itself, because that's how we've based their set of processes for what would be in the handbook. And there are many others, even including NIST for security. Okay, so there's been a pretty good uptake. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about one specific tailoring of 15288, or I guess I should say, what DoD is doing with it. Actually, I want to first talk about the DoD standardization initiative, and then specifically with respect to systems. Okay, so about 3 years ago, DoD went into this activity to do some gap analysis on processes and try to figure out where are the gaps that, if they could fill, would have some significant impact on the system performance of the systems that they're putting out. There are 6 areas that they came up with. One was systems engineering, technical reviews and audits was another, CM, manufacturing management, reliability, and logistics. Okay, so those were the 6 areas that they realized across the life cycle that they needed to be addressing better and more consistently. Okay, now the catch on this is if you send out a DoD working group, all government people, what will the answer be? Why don't we create a MIL standard, right? Except that the Defense Standardization Council said, look, that's not a good answer. In fact, we are legally required to go with industry consensus standards unless we have a really good reason to go to a MIL standard. All right, so it was go back and go work with the industry standards development organizations and let's try and figure this out. So they went out and did with an RFI to the standards development organizations with respect to these different things, and they actually chose different groups for different things. All right, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So what they were trying to do with this was to these 3 things: improve communications, ensure common expectations, and add realism to bids. Okay, that last one, the last 2 are probably the ones that hit home the most to me. How many people here have been on a proposal team in which the way the program manager was going to get the cost down to beat the competition was to cut out half of the systems engineering? Okay, and pardon me? Yes. Right. And so what they wanted to do here was to try and say, look, we want something where we could point to and say, this is what we're looking for. We want you to do these things, all right, which is good. And we want you to bid them. All right, and so everyone's on the same foot. We've got to do the systems engineering. We should put that into our bids. So that's what they were looking for. Okay, in doing this, then their objectives were to make sure that it met the needs of both acquirer and supplier, provided common language, it was tailorable, consistent, and that we could and it should conform to the existing standards. All right, so these are the real key drivers of the objectives that they were trying to achieve. Out of this, they came up with 6 different projects, 2 of which went to the ITripleE Computer Society. Now, so the systems engineering and the technical reviews and audits. And that's because ITripleE was directly involved with ISO IEC, because right now the 2008 version of 15288 is ISO IEC ITripleE 15288. Okay, they started in 2002, they adopted 15288. In 2008 version, they were actually a co-developer of it. All right. And so because of that history, they wanted them to do this. They also felt that the technical reviews and audits needed to be tied very closely to the system engineering processes. Okay, so, and out of this, I became the working group chair for a joint DoD ITripleE working group for DoD systems engineering standardization. And it was an excellent team. We had representation from 7 different DoD organizations, you know, all the service branches, OSD, even DCMA and DAU. All right, we had 17 of the leading contractors involved in the project, and Ken was on the team, so he I'm sure wore many hats, but he was one of our people, and we also had academia involved, a number of the CERC universities. So it was a good team. It was one of the best I've worked with, actually. It was very good. So this is what we ended up with. It was when we went to the SE standard, we decided, since we're looking at the same processes, and we went through, did a gap analysis, felt the processes in 15288 met the need. There was actually no additional process identified as being needed to add to it. And so it made more sense, rather than to repeat 15288, to write an addendum to it. So it was just those things that would be changes, you know, modifications, additions, deletions for the body of it. So what you see here is where, looking at on the left side of this diagram, is this first column is what was in 15288. Okay, and in fact that was based on the FDIS that was being developed. All right, and then what is in that second column is what is in the addendum. So basically, if it was the same, it says, okay, that part applies as stated. If there were any changes or additions, it would put some that additional wording in there. It might be an additional note, it might be an additional task or activity. Okay, and so basically that says that addendum is a delta standard that supplements the base standard. All right, and this part on the right-hand side is the only part that is truly different, I mean, significantly different than the base standard, because the DoD team, DoD ITripleE team, decided that for the application within defense programs, it made sense to identify what would be the expectations in terms of the outputs. But the outputs were to be stated in a way that did not dictate or drive a specific technique or method. Okay, so if you read in the requirements portion, it will say that you need to provide a baseline set of requirements. It does not say that you'll have a specification that looks like such and such format that's so thick and, you know, stapled in the corner or anything like that. It leaves that up to you. All right, and what you also see throughout this is that there's some expected tailoring, both in terms of what the government asks for and allowing for the supplier to also propose additional tailoring. All right. So technical reviews and audits was a little bit different, because it is actually connecting in or linking into 15288 through the planning and the assessment and control processes, primarily the assessment and control. Okay, so 6.2.3 something. But in any case, So it's a standalone standard, but links to the life cycle in 15288. All right, so what you see here is I've shown 3 of the major sections, the ones I think are the most critical. I should say that Clause 4 provides the information about reviews. So it is important for at least ground setting. But then in Clause 5, it provides the requirements for each one of the reviews. In Clause 6, okay, so because it provides requirements in 5, it also is normative. Okay, Clause 6 are the criteria that are to be used in the reviews, okay, and you can see the kinds of things that are included in there. But it is expected to be tailored, that criteria tailored for the program. So it's more specific to the program. As it is tailored, it is normative. Okay, and Clause 7 is application guidance. So it's not normative, it's best practices, lessons learned, things that should be considered during the review. Okay?
What's the word normative?
It means that you must do it. Okay, so it's basically that it's a set of requirements. It establishes a set of requirements. Okay. Thank you for asking, because there are probably many other people who don't recognize the term. Okay, so the reviews that are included, that are expected, are these on the bottom here, ASR through PCA. Now, not every contract will require every one of those, so it depends on where the contract starts, what the focus is, what the responsibilities are. So that's up to, that really is important that the people who are writing the proposal or the RFP and then the proposal make sure that the right reviews are included. There's also some additional reviews that may be applicable at times or may be useful, and those are included in annexes. All right, so, all right, so, and I will just say on this diagram that they wanted to make sure that it was clear that the relationships showed that it is not a linear flow, and you can take a look at this in more depth later. So what's the impact on the industry? Well, we expect to see these 2 on, and the other 4 that I mentioned, eventually on contracts. Okay, so once these are published, DoD is intending on adopting them and promoting those for being included in RFPs. They will probably see things in a more of an incremental rollout. And as they're listed in as requirements in the RFPs, they will likely impact the SOW. And in fact, the RFP language that's being developed right now, which there's a joint industry DoD team that's looking at that and recommending some RFP language, it would include that it affects sections C, L, and M of the RFP. So for those of you who are familiar with government terminology and RFPs, that's the SOW, statement of work, the instructions to the offer, and the evaluation criteria. Okay, so we're expecting that we'll see those, especially in the larger contracts, and you know, I'm not expecting that for most of the players in the DoD arena, it's going to be a huge thing to adjust to, because most of us already use 15288. Our processes are based on the same fundamental concepts. It actually, though, means that we will have to make sure that what we propose and the work we do will follow that, will conform to it. Okay, for non-DoD programs, it's your best guess. It's I expect that anybody could put it in place, and in fact, I would think that some of the non-DoD but defense organizations may. In fact, we had reviewers in the balloting from Australia and the UK. Okay, so there's interest right there. I will be going to Sweden to talk to their defense department about the work here. So I expect that we'll see some uptake also by others. But I think in the international arena, we'll probably see, it will still probably be more based on the base standard of 15288. Okay, so there's work being done within NDIA, and they've got the leadership role in that for looking at establishing some tailoring guidance, establishing some RFP language that's recommended, and also for helping provide some kind of mapping that will help organizations understand if they're conformant or compliant. Okay, in fact, I was involved in a meeting earlier today for the last piece where we're looking at using CMMI as a bridging mechanism, since most of us have done assessments against our processes with CMMI. Well, how does the 15288 and 15288.1 map to CMMI? And if you've already got your processes mapped to CMMI, then you can just follow that through, that logic. That's one possible thing. All right, so the other key resources I wanted to mention, you're already familiar with the SE Handbook. I don't need to tell you what it's for or what it's about, I'm sure. But I will say that this continues the path towards full alignment with 15288. So the drivers for the change include trying to stay in lockstep with the resources that it's dealing with. Remember that oval picture, the technical coevolution. So we've seen changes to 15288 and the CBOC, and we want to make sure those things also are incorporated in. It's also building off of the experiences and the work that's been done from the working groups. And so in the SE Handbook, we've reached out to each one of the working groups that are represented within the topics of the handbook, and it's amazing how many our working groups and our handbook structure match up fairly well, and so they have been taking ownership and done a lot of the authoring of the revision. Okay, and so Dave Walden's our project lead for the revision, and myself, Kevin Forsberg, Doug Hamlin, and Tom Schurtel are the others on the editorial team. Okay, so as we look at where it's going, in 2006, we decided that there was a need to start to follow 15288. It was gaining enough popularity and momentum. And that was the first that we started to align with some of the terminology and general process structure in 3.2, which is where the, actually 3.2.2 is where the certification is at right now. We had adopted all the processes and the same purposes and activities. And in 4.0, when it comes out, it will be fully aligned with all the concepts, terminology, and processes. Okay, so we've completed that level of harmonization. The next few I'll let for you to read. They are basically telling you where the major changes in the handbook are. We mentioned the bookcase or CBOC. CBOC is part of a project called Bookcase. Bookcase is the body of knowledge and curriculum to advance systems engineering. And how many people have heard of GRACE, the Graduate Reference Curriculum for SE? Okay, that is actually a part of this project. It was done together. In fact, the initial objective was to be able to put out a graduate reference curriculum. But when we did it for software, we made sure that it was that there was a body of knowledge to work off of, and you had the ITripleE SWBOC. Okay, now there was no SE body of knowledge to work off of, so it was create the body of knowledge, create the reference curriculum. And what you can see here is, as I have been talking about in some of the other cases, the level of diversity in what we've been doing. You're seeing a diversity here too in terms of the countries that the authors are from. It looks almost like the same kind of spread as what you have in Incose. All right, and it's not only, you'd think maybe with the reference curriculum and this body of knowledge, it would be all academia, but it's not. It's a pretty good spread among different players. So we were glad to see that kind of diversity. And oh, by the way, Incose, ITripleE Computer Society, and the CERC, which is a research center for under DoD, jointly manage this and are the stewards for it going forward. All right, so I won't go through what's and read this to you. You can read down. The current version's 3.11. When we are out at the IW, I'm going to be coordinating some of the pieces in the part 3 with the working groups and trying to also use them and their resources, not only for the SE Handbook, but for helping to manage the CBOC. But you can see it goes from anywhere from just information about systems to the processes and practices, down through how do we enable SE and the kinds of case studies or vignettes about systems engineering. I mentioned before about addendums. NATO actually preceded DoD. They had an addendum for 15288 in place a few years prior to DoD. And in fact, it was their proof of concept that we patterned off of. The difference between the NATO one and the DoD one is that DoD has added also the outputs. All right, so, and then the last of the pieces here I wanted to talk to was just the fact that 632 is working towards alignment with this set of resources. And there's been a lot of stops and starts on it. Okay, there's some scope things that have to be resolved yet also in terms of how it works in conjunction with 15288, not just its alignment. But the work is, they're trying to get it started again. So you may see a revision sometime in the future on that as well. Okay, well, Tech America actually is an it's an industry association that also was doing standardization. I should have updated this to take off Tech America and put it as SAE, because SAE bought the standards arm of Tech America. So you're probably familiar with SAE International, okay? And they actually only go by the acronym now. It used to be yes, Society of Automotive Engineering, and they're well beyond that now. So they just go by SAE because people recognize the acronym.
ITripleE is a USA organization. Does the international organization?
Well, ITripleE is actually it's domiciled in the U.S., but it is actually an international organization as well. Yes, yes. In fact, very large one at that.
Just out of curiosity, given the Incose investment in 15288, why wouldn't SAE just put SAE in front of ISO?
I'm not sure.
632 is supposed to go into even more detail.
It's a good question. I don't have a good answer. Yeah.
It's America.
Okay, so looking for this, now we're in the summary. Looking forward, you can see everything's coming out soon. So it will all be in a theater near you very soon. Well, at least maybe from a standard subscription near you. You know, most of it's first quarter of 2015. That is not by accident. It's because we need to align them because they refer to each other. And so, you know, we've actually approved 15288.1 and 2, but we're waiting for the base standard to come out because of the association between them. And since the handbook quotes things from 15288, it needs to wait for the base document to be out. So it's not actually putting out the words before what is being quoted from puts them out. Okay, you'll see there's other work happening very, very soon as well. So we need to continue to influence the harmonization, and what you see is the collaboration is working. The harmonization has come a long way, and what we have seen in the evolution of system engineering resources, I think has been very significant.
Okay, do we have any questions? We have a mic coming around. Yeah. Actually, Garry, coming around.
I was thinking the reviews.
Oh, hold on, Paul. The
reviews that you talked about and the addendum. All right. I think everybody can hear.
Well, yeah, but the people on the phone,
I can really get louder.
people on the phone may not be able to hear you without the microphone, though.
Did not know that.
Yes.
I didn't have.
Having a larger audience other than here.
Hang on one second.
When you talked about the reviews, I've noticed, because I teach the handbook, I know it fairly well, but they really don't talk about, I mean, they talk about it very generically.
Right.
But I'm wondering if you're trying to bring those reviews into the handbook, since you're going to have an addendum or whatever.
Yeah.
What did you call it, an annex or an addendum? Or?
Yeah, well, the 15288.1 is an addendum. That's for the processes. The technical reviews and audits will actually be a full standard. But in the handbook, we are talking a bit more about the reviews, but we're still page limited. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And so
you're
what
trying to keep it the same.
What we are doing is we are pointing out to the new standard.
Where to go.
Yes.
Okay. And also, are you, one of the more frustrating things when I teach it is value engineering, lean engineering, and the HSI portion. So I'm wondering if you're leaving those in place, just so I can deal with that. But
The easy answer is yes.
Oh, brutal. Okay.
Yes, an important piece.
All right. And we're, as members, we're still getting a PDF.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Okay. Good job.
Yeah, what you will do is you will get the preprint PDF, okay? So you won't get the exactly formatted as Wiley will be selling their published version as a book, okay? But all members will be getting the preprint PDF. Too many P's in that.
Garry.
Yes, Steve.
Regarding the DoD strategic initiative or standards initiative, the focus seems to be on the relationship between the acquirer and the contractor and the supplier.
Right.
Where the new 15288, as you said, includes the capability development part. So is DoD going to relook at its JSID processes and other activities that lead up to the system definition process?
That's a good question. And I think that I'd have to say at best that's TBD yet. I know they are looking at how do they improve making the right decisions earlier in the life cycle. Okay, there are a lot of hoops to jump through and coordination that has to happen. That's outside of the scope of what I've got the influence over. But in my discussions with people, they do want to try and make some better things happen in that arena. Okay, that goes hand in hand also though with some of the work that's being done in affordability analysis. Okay, because in that capability, the decisions for fulfilling a new capability, there's the how do I not only get the right solution but an affordable solution as well. Which gets us back to better buying power. There's some work that we're doing between Moore's, Incose, NDIA, and there's a couple other players on affordability analysis. And the affordability analysis guide from that will be coming out, just about the same time, actually. Where we were targeting the end of 2014, but it will probably be more like February timeframe.
Pre-program, before it becomes a program, technical work, a couple
Right.
guys, I think, I can't remember.
Yeah, they do. And that's what Steve was talking about, the JSIDS process. It's in CS, yeah, there you go, 3170. Yeah. So it's a well-defined process, but the thing is, are we doing all the right things to make sure that we get the right solution identified and an affordable solution? Yes.
Let's see, is there a plan to revise Gracie in light of these changes, or is there a thought that it needs to be revised?
Yes, actually,
And
that's
what's the
great.
schedule for doing that?
We will be discussing that in the meetings next week. Right. We have a bookcase meeting next week where we'll be looking at, okay, what's the right timing, and who will be the next project lead for it, because the person who was the project lead did a great job previously, will not be available to support it. So, but yes, we're realizing that the set of processes that drove the competencies that are in the core BOC, and so I'm assuming you're familiar with that. That's the core body of knowledge, those competencies that are essential within the SE curriculum. That part of it will shift a little bit, I believe, with the changes that we're seeing.
Question.
Yes.
Agile software development has been ongoing for quite a few years, and we're working right now on trying to normalize system engineering, agile system engineering, from the basis of lean system engineering that's been done. Had you addressed anything with agile in this document?
In 15288, no, okay, because it's premature, because in order for something to get into a standard, it has to be to the level that there are best practices understood within that area of the discipline, okay? But I will tell you that Incose is working it, and there's a new project that was initiated, and there's actually, it's went up to the board for approval because it required a bit of funding as well. That is looking at what's called Agile System Engineering Lifecycle Model. Rick Dove is leading it. There's 4 other people who are co-leads, including myself, Jack Ring, Kevin Forsberg, Bud Lawson. So if anybody knows Bud from the, he was actually one of the original authors or editors for 15288. Actually, I should say he was the architect for it. And I think there's one other person I'm missing. But anyway, that project is looking at going out and discovering what are the principles that work. They're going to be doing site visits, site workshops at sites, host sites. So if you want to be a host site, let me know. Okay, because, and what it will do is they'll come in for 3 days, work with the team. There's a set of interviews. There's a bunch of things to examine what's being done on projects that you believe you've been doing some system level agile approaches, and try to get down to the fundamental principles that that work, and try to do a bit of discovery, realizing that there are differences between what is needed for software versus systems, because you're looking at a different scope and different time frames and so on. But there is enough work being done out there that we believe we can do some discovery of what those principles are, start to capture those and build on it. So that there's also some other work that Rick's working group is doing.
Well, I'm actually on the working group, and I've written some of the papers.
Okay.
And been co-authors in some of the papers. And the interesting thing is, Rick never asked us about any of this stuff, so we'd like to go beat him up at this IW this time.
You need to then. Yeah. I've been involved in some of the work peripherally, and I've had a couple other people working projects. So you probably know Mike Kokenauer, and I know Ron Lyles has been very, very strongly involved in that working group. So, but in any case, yeah, this is something we need to do. We believe also, because the level of modularity, the staying at the what level for the processes in 15288, that a lot of what's in 15288 can be used, but it will be put together in a different way than you would for a different kind of programmer project, okay? But we'll need to discover that. We'll need to find out. And there may be some things that end up influencing changes in the next revision of 15288 or the handbook or other things.
Thank you.
So to pull that agile thread a little bit, Gary, I think take a look at if you're going to be involved in this, I think you should take a look at the SAFE model, the scaled agile
Right.
framework, NGA over
The
the last.
LSE portion of Leffing Wells?
Just in general, I was to say NGA is adopting that internally. And if you went out to Fed BizOps over the last year, you'd see numerous solicitations for trainers to train their workforce in that framework. So that's something to take a look at. I mean, because if that starts kind of catching on, outside of NGA, maybe moving over to NRO and, other different IC entities, and that starts to catch hold, you might.
I'd like to talk to you before I leave.
Yeah.
Sounds like you may have an opportunity also to be a host.
Last question. A lot of people don't have access directly because of the cost of the ISO 15288. And so their introduction to it is through the Incose certification process. So my question is, with the DoD supplement, how will that be handled? Will that be a document that's for sale? Will it be free of charge? How will that be handled?
Now, the agreement that was made on it was that the DoD themselves will receive copies of it, but that the people doing work for them will need to purchase copies. Okay, so whether that changes or not, that's outside. I don't get involved in contracts and charges, so.
No,
yeah,
yeah, because that's obviously interfered with the level of consciousness of the basic document. And if you haven't seen a copy, that's because you didn't buy one. And it's one of the things that we'll be giving away tonight in our raffle. So if there are no other questions, or last call for a question, Chuck.
Was there anybody participating from either organizations such as GAO, who put together the basic cost document for the guidance document for all of the U.S. government, or some of the professional groups that are specialized, such as the Space Systems Cost Analysis Group, which has been intimately always working with the basic system engineering processes?
It may not be the answer you're looking for, but yes, DCMA was part of our team for the DoD portion, and Space and Missiles Command was part of the team. There were different players within. If you're talking about for the DoD standards,
basically, yes, but not just limited to that. That's why I brought in the GAO.
Yeah,
because there was a heavy influence by experience brought to the GAO
well, we
cost
have
documentation.
On the SC7 team, there are various government players, and they change at the different times. The U.S. Technical Advisory Group is made up of different organizations, and so individuals aren't the members. It's the organization is the member. For a while, NSA was part of it. And different. I know DoD is a member, but GAO is not. Okay, now whether or not their voice filters through in some way, I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, DHS had been a member for a while, and so some of these groups come and go depending on what's being worked, because of there's a fee to play.
I think we're at the end of your program. Can we have a round of applause for Gary's presentation? I think that this is a special treat for us